The wind came from the north, and the north had teeth. It gnawed at exposed skin and bit beneath furs. It stirred ash in the yards and set the ravens to muttering along the crenels. Jon Snow stood upon the wall with Ghost beside him, the direwolf's white fur rippling like frost-laced grasses. Far below, men moved as black moats around the ring forts and stables and stores that clung to Castle Black. Farther still, beyond the ridge of forest and frozen river, campfire smoke wound into the gray sky, the last sign of the king who had chosen to come where no king had business. He could taste iron on the air, as if a forge was being born in snow. The thought shaped itself with the sound of armored men on the steps behind him. When Jon turned, King Stannis Baratheon stood topped in fell light, chain and leather layered under a black mantle furred at the collar. The bright heart with a crowned stag burned into cloth at his breast. The man's face seemed carved of knuckles and disfavor, and yet something like iron order held his dark gaze steady. Melisandre moved behind him, a streak of red in a white world. Her eyes were neither warm nor cold. They were fire-banked and waiting. "You're fond of the heights," Stannis said. "I stand them sometimes, to remember where I belong." "And where is that?" Jon scratched Ghost's neck where the fur was thick. "Here. Then you'll like my offer poorly." Stannis stepped to the edge and looked out into the endless plain, as if the white waste would surrender its secrets for the asking. On his left hung a sword hilted plainly, no jewels and little polish. A king's sword, Jon thought, if the king cared more for the edge than the show. Behind them, the Lord of Light's priestess drew close as if to warm her hands over Jon's doubt. "Your stars burn bright tonight," she said low, "for him and the king. In the fire I saw a wolf with a dragon's shadow. It hunted in snow and would not be driven off." Jon kept his face still. He had grown used to strange words from her, used to the sensation that she was speaking about him and also about none of them. "Wolves have no shadows in a white world," he said. "They have the shadows they earn," she returned. Stannis snorted, impatient with riddles. "I have need of men who understand walls," he said to Jon. "Not just the stone kind, the wall between a name and a place. The wall between what men swear and what men require. I require a lord for Winterfell." Ghost's head came up at the name of home. The wind rose like a rumor through the murder holes. "I am sworn," Jon said. "The Night's Watch is not blind," Stannis said, "nor deaf to need. Your brothers elected a lord commander yet? No. Too many knives in too many hands. Too many small lords playing at governors of a ruin. You lack a head. Let me give them one by removing a complication. Renounce the watch. I'll pardon it. I will make you Jon Stark and name you Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. Kneel and I will set the North to rights with you at its heart." Jon felt something rise in his chest and clamp tight. The words came hard because they had been forged long ago. He had beaten them into shape through long nights with the wind battering the dungeon and his father's quiet face looking out from a place no candle could reach. "I took a vow," he said. "You were forced to as a boy. My brothers took vows for me, too. They took my choices with them. I learned to live with the lack." Stannis's mouth thinned. "My justice is old and ugly snow, but not deaf to sense. The North cries for a Stark. Your half-sister is wed to a monster and flayed men rule in the hall where your father kept winter. If you won't be lord for yourself, be it for them." Jon turned away. Far along the wall, two black shapes wrestled canvas from a frozen drum to repair a windbreak. A tink of iron on iron came, then a curse snapped thin by cold. If he remembered Winterfell too sharply, he would feel the hot water on his skin and the smell of oak smoke and bread. He would taste venison gravy and apples. He would see Robb's easy grin at table, Arya's elbows planted as she argued with Sansa over a pearl clasp. The places in him that remembered were not starving, but they knew how to gorge. If he gave his heart to them, they would gorge on him. Stannis said, "There is more." Melisandre's breath clouded in a plume between them. "The wall stands as it has always stood, and not. It is a gate as much as a barrier. You can feel it, Jon Snow. Power leaks like heat from a cracked oven. Your brothers cling to old words because they fear new fires. They will need a lord who can bridge oath and need. I am not that bridge, he said. You are. I have dreamed your path. You think your blood a simple stew, wolf and woman, bastard and snow. But when I gaze into the embers, I see winter roses blooming through frost, and a shadow of scales turning to smoke, and a king's crown falling into a pool gone ice-black. Do you speak of the dead? Jon said, too quickly because his throat had tightened. My father never wore a crown. The dead speak through what lives. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they scream. She lifted a gloved hand and turned it. The rings at her fingers clicked like little chains of red and gold. I do not tell you your father. I tell you a path through winter. Take his grace's offer. Take the name Stark. In the name you will hold the north steady. In the shadow, claim what is older than any stag. Jon watched a sundog burn around the faint hidden sun. 100 thoughts rose and fought like a kettle of ravens. If I kneel, I do it before a heart tree and my father's gods, he said. And I do not burn any gods for a southern fire. Stannis's jaw set. You do not tell me whom I worship, and you do not tell the north. Jon let the wind strip the heat from his face. Your cause needs the north to love you. They can abide a Baratheon king. They will not abide a man who burns what they kneel by. You would advise me, Stannis said, half sneer and half nod. I would serve the realm, Jon said. If I serve you, it must be as a son of Winterfell, not as a man who spurned her trees. Silence stretched, held together like sheets spread over a bed full of knives. Stannis stared at the miles of white like he could batter them into roads with his will. When he spoke, his voice did not soften. It tilted. Say more. You came up here to say it. Jon drew slow, cold air. The breath burned his lungs with a spice of fear. If I take your name, he said, I won't abandon the watch. Stannis turned his head. You misunderstand terms. I do not. Winterfell needs a Stark. The wall needs a Stark more. Put me in black and you save the north. Put me in gray and I leave the wall to men who argue over latrines while the dead climb. I will take the name you offer. I will be Jon Stark for the north in name. I will speak to Manderly and Umber and the mountain clans and Karstark's remnant and the broken men who would follow any banner that looks like home. I will carry your letters and stand in your halls. But I stay where I am needed. I remain here. I lead the watch. I put the north under your banner by my voice and my name, and the watch remains whole. It sounds like you would have both, Stannis said. I would have neither and keep 1,000 alive. Jon let the words find anchor. Call me Lord Protector of the North in your writs. Call me Jon Stark if you must. For the sake of the old oaths the North remembers. But know that I will not come down from this wall and put on wolfskin while it rots from the wind. I will hold the north steady while you march on the Dreadfort. I will bring you fealty when your justice is just. And I ask price. Stannis's mouth twitched. Amusement, maybe, the first edge of it Jon had seen. A bold bastard marches up to a king and names terms. Say your price. Spare the boy, Jon said. Melisandre stilled, and in the stillness the wind seemed to lean closer to listen. Which boy? Stannis asked. The babe you call King's blood, Jon said. I know your lady's rights. You whisper that a certain blood burns brighter. You skin the memory of it when you list your victories. He has done no wrong but be born. Spare him, and spare old gods in this keep. Make your fires outside. Melisandre's voice glowed. You fear fire because it shows you what lies under snow. You would bargain your soul away to keep a babe from the flames. Such bargains are the province of queens. Jon met her gaze evenly. If you look into your fires for truth, look and see what burning him buys. The king's road littered with ash and bones. A winter louder, not quieter. Stannis's eyes bored in. And your service buys me more kindly roads. No roads like to be kindly, Jon said, but I can help you make them passable. And there is more. He turned, drawing Ghost close with a touch. The direwolf's red eyes watched and did not blink. You spoke of shadows, my lady. You spoke of winter roses. The north whispers one name under another. When I was a boy, I heard something in my father's voice when he spoke of my mother. He never named her. He bled to keep her safe from men's eyes. He told me once that war turns names into torches. If you will not burn gods, do not burn names. I will carry mine as a Stark for the north, but in claim, in quiet and in council, I will carry another counsel. Melisandre did not blink. Something like hunger moved under her words. Say it. I believe my mother was not what men think, Jon said, and my father may have been a prince. If there is any truth in it, the claim matters to you. It matters to any who fear the night. Keep it quiet. Keep it between us and men who keep their tongues behind their teeth. Use it as you need, but do not make me a banner in a civil war of embers. I will not be your torch. For a long moment only the wind spoke and the ice groaned as if the wall itself weighed and shifted. Stannis said, "Words are brittle, names are wind. Win me the north with your voice and your counsel, and I will let your watch alone. I will not burn your damn tree. I will let the boy live. Stand me before the great lords on ground of your choosing and have them kneel, and I will style you Stark where it suits me. Winterfell will not remain in flayed hands." Jon inclined his head. "Then we understand one another." "Not quite." Stannis gestured to Melisandre. "If you carry a claim in secret, woman, it is useless to me. If I need your blood for a working, I will have it. If I need your counsel, I will ask it. But if you decide to declare yourself dragon while I am king, I will have your head from your shoulders before your wolf can draw blood." "Justice plain," Jon said softly. "And fairness, too. You'll want things of me. I want things of you. Say it." "Davos Seaworth," Jon said. "Send him to White Harbor with letters and my voice. Wyman Manderley will not heed you gladly, but he will heed a Stark. Send Davos with me to the gate of White Harbor, and I will open it. I will bring you a fleet and bread for your men." Stannis's grim mouth flexed. "You know much for a boy. I know what winter requires. You cannot starve the Dreadfort with empty hands. Seaworth is mine, not yours." Then he nodded once. "But you think like a lord, and I would use that while you pretend you are only a crow. Very well. You will go with Seaworth. We'll see whether name and voice are worth the parley." Melisandre moved a half-step nearer, the ruby at her throat pulsing like a heart under thin skin. "I have seen it," she said. "A great lord chewing fat by a lantern while guards snore with bellies full of heavy beef. He listens to a wolf and calls the sea to heal. There will be pies and knives, and a song that names no king. The north remembers under snow." Stannis did not hide his impatience. "Enough riddles. Go and see your pies if you wish, Snow. Bring me men who kneel, with knives behind their backs so long as they kneel and stab others, not me." Jon thought of what she had said and found his skin prickling. "And what of my brothers?" he asked. "I cannot leave them without a head." "You will have it," Stannis said. "I appoint men where I will. The Watch elects where it will. I suspect both of us will get what we need if we are canny. Speak to your stewards. Speak to the old man with milk-blue eyes." "Maester Aemon," Jon said. Stannis gave him the short nod of a soldier who recognizes a good blade. "Aemon. He has more iron than many with double his years. Leave him a plan. We make for the Dreadfort in a fortnight." When the king turned to go, Melisandre lingered. "Keep your wolf close. He wards you even when you sleep. The shadow of a blade will fall where you think yourself most loved. There is a letter in your near future written by a hand drunk on fear. When you read it, do not run. The trap is not where the words say." Jon's mouth dried. He had grown used to fear arriving from angles he could name. Giants over the gate, then howling at the tunnels, ragged watchers muttering of dead men walking. He did not like the taste of an enemy with quill-stained fingers. "Thank you for fire and doom," he said. "For truth," she said, and was gone in a rippling of red. He was left with wind and Ghost's white bulk pressed to his leg. He put a hand in the direwolf's fur and felt the steady strength beneath the coat. "We'll try it your way," he said to the air and the wolf and the dead who listened in every stone. "We'll walk two paths at once and trust our feet to find the middle." Ghost made a sound like breath through teeth and leaned harder. The next days were a braid of errands. He and Samwell Tarly spent long hours in Eamon's tower while the old maester's hands fluttered in stiff air like pale birds settling. Eamon listened more than he spoke. When Jon told him of the pact he had made with Stannis, the old man's milky eyes grew brighter as if they had found some small clear patch of sky. "You would be a Stark in name," Eamon rasped, "and keep your duties. It is a narrow ledge to walk, but the narrow ledge is where walls stand. The broad fields are for summer. I thought you would tell me I betray the watch." "Why would I?" Eamon's smile was made of bone. "I have more patience with vows than kings do. A vow is a seed. It grows in the soil it is given. If you pull it up to examine its roots every day, it dies. Better to cultivate the garden around it, boy. Better to water carefully. The wall has need of a Stark who can speak to kings and lords and tell them winter's truth without softening it. You have a chance to be that. Do not put your foot where you cannot bear the height." Sam frowned over quills and parchment. "We must be careful with the elections," he said, trying to fold his hands as if they were honest birds. "If you leave, there will be men who will try to fill the gap. Cotter Pike and Dennis Mallister must be set at one another subtly. Then when the time is right, your name comes as the compromise. You will return with the North's favor and win the chair like a third path." Jon gave him a look edged with fondness. "When did you grow knives?" "I have always had them," Sam muttered. "They didn't look like knives because I was bad at using them, but I can count, and I can read men when they want to win." "Then we do this," Jon said, feeling the ledge steady under his feet. The morning he left for White Harbor, the sky refused to decide whether to snow. It hung heavy and pale, brooding. Davos Seaworth awaited him in a cloak patched as neatly as a saint's tail. They met in the yard where horses steamed and men swore softly through scarves. "Your Grace says you're to be my lantern," Davos said by way of greeting. "I've been a lantern before. They don't do much but show throat to the wind." "I'll be a lantern with teeth," Jon said. Davos's mouth crinkled. "Good. Then let's not tarry. The sooner we get to White Harbor, the sooner we will be fed well enough to regret it." They rode with a handful of Kingsmen and a few Black brothers who had been foresters once and could smell when the snow changed its mind. Ghost shadowed them, silent as moonlight, and wherever he passed the horses kept their feet. Davos rode like a man who had learned to sit a saddle late and wisely. He had patience for storms and stubborn wheels both. He asked questions as gently as sand smoothing a rough plank. Jon found himself answering because he needed the answers, too, spoken aloud. "They'll want me to kneel," he said. "Manderly will. They all will." Davos gave him a sideways glance. "Will you?" "I'll kneel to the king I've named. For the things I named him for. Not for his god, not for his pride. That's the North's way. And if Manderly's way is to keep his head while oats and flour are short, then he'll do it loudly and sneer at me with a full mouth. I will feed his men and make them think I put my hands out when in truth I put roots." Davos laughed low. "I wish I had been born to talk. It seems a finer ship than any I sailed." As White Harbor's towers rose from gray water, Jon found his breath deepen. The city smelled of salt and wood smoke and fish guts. It pulsed with men shouting and timber creaking and ropes groaning. It was not Winterfell, but it was old, and its pride had nothing of the silk of the South. The gates admitted them after parley with men who wanted to see seals and signets but who saw Ghost and made the sign of old gods across their chests without thinking. Wyman Manderly received them in a hall warm enough to make a man forgive every slight winter had ever given him. Lanterns of green glass swayed from beams. Harps shivered low. Jon stood straight beneath whalebone carvings while Davos did the opening courtesies. Manderly had thighs like barrels and a face like dough baked too quickly. His small black eyes glittered with craft. "A king asks and a Stark answers," the fat lord said, eating a honeyed fig with the same care he gave letters. "So says the old tale. Yet the king who asks is a southern stag with a burning heart on his breast. What does a Stark make of that?" Jon stepped forward. "A Stark makes of it winter sense," he said. "I have stood on the wall and watched the cold build its armies. The king who marches north and spends his strength on flayed men makes more sense to me than any who lights his halls with candles and pretends the year turns kinder. Manderly studied him as one might a fish too handsome to be common. And which Stark are you, boy? The one who fell at the twins after crowning himself? The girl who vanished in wolf's skin? The child dragged from his bed? The little lord eaten by a kraken on some iron spit? I am the one who stands here, Jon said. My lord, my father was Eddard Stark of Winterfell. I cannot undo the salt in my blood, but I can serve the bones that sleep under the crypts. I am Jon Snow to brothers who know me, and Jon Stark here for the north because a king has styled me so. The whisper swelled around the hall like wind around tents. Manderly licked honey from his thumb. Bold words, bold styling. A bastard who puts on a name like a cloak can sometimes carry it better than a trueborn who thinks the name will carry him. And what do you ask, Stark Snow? Ships, Jon said, and his voice did not falter. Flour and ships. Men, if you will. A road of water through ice. Your men hammer piers from trees in the wolf's den and call it daily work. I want them to call it winter victory. Send your ships north to a place called Hardhome. There are thousands there caught between cliff and ice. One day the ice will make war on us all. Save 5,000 from becoming its first ranks. Hardhome, Manderly mused, as if rolling a coin under his tongue. And if I do this good and honest deed, what do I get besides prayers to trees I do not kneel to? Davos shifted his weight. Jon saw the Onion Knight about to lay out the king's terms and cut him lightly aside. You get this. The North will not forget your bread when hunger grows. The king will not forget your fleet when he makes a harbor of Dragonstone hot again with forges and glass-green fires. The Watch will not forget who answered when crows cawed in earnest. You will have a Stark who owes you a debt he does not wish to owe. And you will have pies to serve your enemies. If I read the scent of your ovens true. Laughter broke around the hall. Men thumped their cups. One old man with a wine-flushed nose wheezed. Manderly's eyes gleamed sharper, like stones under a stream. He waved away a servant who had been waiting with a platter of meat like dark moons. You read many scents, boy. Your wolf's nose works in your head as well as his snout. Very well. I will send ships. I'll send bakers and masons as well, for the piers you want. And I will give you 20 swift cogs for the king. He will give me something, too. What? Jon asked. Manderly smiled as if he had stolen the answer from a locked coffer. Justice. I want 3 candidates for justice to dine with me shortly. The sort who drink with phrase. Davos's face closed like a hand. Jon kept his voice even. Justice is a hard word in winter. Hard words are the ones that hold when the wind slaps them. Manderly flicked honey from his fingers. Eat with me, my lords. We will sing old songs and newer ones. That night there were pies shaped like trout, and pies shaped like little towers with onion domes, and pies shaped like nothing but meat and brown crust oozing deliciously where it had cracked. Davos ate carefully and with gratitude. Jon took his hunger and leashed it, letting a portion satisfy the boy and keeping the rest to harden into use. Manderly sang as promised. He sang of a king in the north whose beard took frost like an honor, and of a wolf whose howl called men to their feet. There was a refrain that had no king in it at all, and yet the hall filled with the thudding of tankards and men's heels like drums in snow. When the fat lord finally leaned back and patted his belly, his small eyes were bright with something that was not wine. Take your ships, he said. Take my word to your king. And if you see a fry with a purse open and eyes shut, remind him that some debts cannot be paid in coin. Jon felt the work settle like a beam laid into stone. He thought of what he had asked and what he had gained, and then he wrote letters until his hand went numb. He sent ravens to White Harbor's captains and to Cotter Pike at Eastwatch, telling him that cogs were coming and their bellies must be filled with frightened folk rather than fish. The sea roads opened like cracks in ice. They went to Hardhome, and men he did not know staggered aboard with eyes like holes burnt in paper. Children were bundled in old furs that stank of brine. Women wept without tears because they had shed salt enough to pickle a cod. The dead came down out of the pines one night like a blue wind, and arrows couldn't find purchase in meat that had remembered too little life. But Valyrian steel did, and dragonglass. The first time Jon's blade met a thing that had been a man and was not, the sound it made raised the hair on his neck. It sang like ice cracking to spring and smoke struggling up from a new-made vent. Tormund Giantsbane, who had more sense than half the lords Jon had met, laughed wild and fought, and then wept when he saw a living child take a breath on White Harbor's dock. Stannis' march began with the north pricking its ears up to a wolf's call. The mountain clans came swinging axes and oaths like old songs. Crowfoot Umber came with fewer teeth and more rage than any man should carry to war. Alice Karstark came fleeing from a room in which men wrote marriage contracts as if they were carving a mare's flank. She came to Jon at Castle Black with a hood over her hair and fear like frost in her eyes, and Jon gave her a path under his protection. He stood her before the heart tree, married her to Sigorn of Then, and watched as two old stories were forced to hold hands. He wrote to Stannis after, and Stannis sent a dry note that said, "You think better than I like. Use it." They used it. When Stannis fought at a crofter's village, the ice groaned and then swallowed, and Freys in bright cloth went down with their bright arrogance to a slick, black sleep. Asha Greyjoy, taken stolid in chains, watched the king arrange his trap with the same face she used to watch men boast. She saw a hard justice that did not love blood but poured it out as if it were the price for winter wheat. Inside Winterfell, choices turned to knives. Roose Bolton played nurse to an army with bellyaches and minds full of sharp little grievances. His bastard strutted like a rooster with a flayed man's cloak for plumage. He cut men for glancing at him wrongly. He flayed others for speaking true. The lord who had murdered Jon's brother's men made a bride of a girl in Arya's name and called it alliance. There were pies at that wedding, too. They were heavy and savory and set before the Freys with the courtesy of hosts, who mean to keep a guest's attention while his throat is being measured for a blade. Mance Rayder had died in flame and screamed for mercy, and men had turned away with their stomachs tight. Then he had not died at all, and winter's tricks had seemed suddenly as familiar as old songs. He came into Winterfell as Abel the singer with 6 women whose hands were calloused from more than lutes. When the snows wrapped the world and men began to imagine spring only as a story their children would tell wrong, Abel's women moved through halls half-lit and brought whispers like knives under fur. Jane Poole wept out of the mask they had put on her and ran with a Greyjoy who had remembered his name as if he'd found it carved on the underside of his skin. Run west. Jon had told men he had sent quiet into the hills. If you see 2 figures moving strange, a girl shivering and a man with his fear visible as breath, do not take the shape for truth. Take them in. Bring them to the king or to me. It was Mors Umber who found them, and his beard had bits of frost like pearls woven in. Theon Greyjoy had lived long enough under pain to be new in his old bones. He shuddered still, like a horse lashed too many times, but when he raised his eyes to Jon at last, there was a man inside them, wounded but real. Jane shook as winter shakes last leaves from a hawthorn. Jon took her hand and warmed it between his palms and told her she had a name, and when she wept it was clean. Stannis wanted Winterfell. He wanted it like a man wants a hearth when the night eats his camp. He set his men in to grind away at Bolton's circles, and he sent for Jon. Jon came in white and black and with Ghost moving like a quiet tide. They stood in the shadow of the broken godswood where the heart tree had grown old, watching men forget their better selves, and there Jon made his speech. He named the names who had bent knee already: White Harbor's ships out on the Gulf, clans in the hills, Umbers and men of barrows and wheels. He described not victories trumpeted at a feast, but bread in bellies and warm wool on children, and the ordinary justice of not flaying men because their words or their silences cut the wrong way. Men listened because stillness carries a voice further than shouting does. Winterfell is a hearth, not a flaying post, Jon finished. You cannot rule the north by fear. You can hold it by fear for a season, but winter is not a season. Winter eats seasons. It eats men who pretend to be more than men. My father taught me the north by walking it. He did not imagine it from a seat by the fire. If we take Winterfell and hold it, we hold it by remembering what it is. A place where men swear and mean it. a place where dead are honored and the living share what keeps the dead in their graves. My Lord King, if you would be king in the north, show them what king means in winter. Stannis' answering nod was as small as any man had ever made, but something like respect warmed its edges. The siege bent like a bough under snow's weight. Roose tried his whispers and his small clean-cut speeches, and then discovered they could not thicken the soup nor unfreeze the wells. His men ate horses and then thoughts they liked less. He sent his bastard to make terror into glue, but terror makes poor mortar when men's fingers lose feeling. The pink letter arrived at Castle Black with its pelts of rage and lies. Its words howled. Bastards and threats and boasts about kings roasted on winter spits. Jon looked at the letters and saw the shape Melisandre had warned of. Saw the way fear had put its mouth to someone's ear and drunk until it vomited scribbles. He did not run. He laid the letter on the table between him and his officers and let them taste its bile. Then he set it beside other letters. A call to Eastwatch to ready piers, a request to White Harbor for more dried fish, a quiet note to Stannis naming the letter for the trap it was. He did not tell his men that the little hairs on his arms had lifted when he read the lists of hostages marched to destruction if he did not come. He kept Ghost close, as instructed, and the dire wolf came and lay his cold heavy head on Jon's boot. That, more than words, put steadiness back into the air. The battle at Winterfell did not unfold as singers prefer. There was no bright charge, no single horn call that turned the tide. There was hunger and cold and men making sudden decisions with hands that did not feel like their own. There was Roose Bolton's face when the gate fell at last and Stannis' men pushed through. No fear there, only calculation too slow to matter. There was Ramsay's laughter. Jon heard it across a court choked with snow and smoke and found it very small. Ramsay ran toward the kennels because men often turn to the thing that makes them feel big when all else makes them small. Pitch smoked there and torches rolled under the benches. Ghost's growl filled the near dark, and then there was screaming. That was a sound even the kennels could not love. When the doors to the great hall were flung open and men crowded in, warmth hit them like a slap. Smoke folded up to the rafters and the banners hanging there took it in like old sins. Jon crossed the hall with the simple walk of a man who knows the destination and fears it and goes anyway. He went to the place at the high table where his father's chair had once stood. He did not sit. He set his glove down upon the long oaken surface and felt where wine and grease had stained it through 100 winters. He went down into the crypts alone with Ghost and a single tallow candle. Stone shapes loomed and bowed and accepted him. The ribs of the earth creaked as if the old dead turned on stone beds to listen. He found Lyanna's statue with a crown of carved winter roses in her hair, and for a moment the candle's light trembled, as if a draft had risen through cracks in the world. He knelt. He set the candle down. The air smelled of cold and old iron. "I don't know," he said aloud. His voice sounded small but true. "If you were my mother, I will not ask your pardon for saying so. You deserve better than becoming the pretext for men's claims. But I must know where to set my feet." The candle flame shuddered. The roses above her brow were stone that someone had loved enough to carve into life. He reached to touch the base of the statue where dust lay thick and undisturbed, except, perhaps, not undisturbed. A thin seam described a square the size of a hand. Jon stared. He pressed his fingers into the seam and found it lift. A compartment no larger than a man's breath lay inside. It contained a bundle wrapped in old cloth that had gone tender with years. He unfolded it with care because anything that survived winter in the earth should be met with patience. Inside lay a small parchment roll and, under it, something that gleamed when the candle shook. The parchment was sealed in leather against damp. His fingers seemed clumsy as he worked it open. There was his father's hand, angular and modest, the letters as right-angled as stakes hammered into frozen ground. "My son," it began. Jon had to stop and breathe because the world had turned to a small hard circle of light, and within it the words lay like bones, true and cold. He read. He read until the letters blurred and he had to wipe his eyes with a thumb because the damp would destroy what couldn't be replaced. The letter did not boast. It did not spin. It told of a tower in the south and a room that smelled of blood and milk and a promise given to a dying girl whose eyes looked at Ned Stark as if the entire world stood in his breast. It told of a name whispered like a prayer, and it told of a truth too sharp for the world that followed a rebellion. It asked forgiveness for a sin that would have shamed a lesser man, hiding truth to preserve a life. It asked Jon to be himself. He reached for the other object. It was a ring of plain gold set with a single dark sapphire, scratched with wear. It fit his finger, though he did not put it on. He held it and listened to the stones breathe. Ghost's nose nudged his wrist and then rested against his knee. The dire wolf watched him with eyes incapable of lies. When he climbed into the hall again, men were shouting Stannis' name because they had learned to shout it. Jon moved through the heat to the king. The king looked at him from under his heavy brows and saw something had changed. His eyes tightened by a hair. In the little solar that had once been Eddard Stark's, Jon set the ring on a table and then set the letter beside it. He did not hand them to the king. He placed them for him to see, one after the other. He told Stannis what the letter said. He used no music and no adornment, only the words that had lived in stone. The king read. He did not smile. He did not frown. He did not reach for fire or call for Melisandre to say whether the embers agreed. He took the letter in and let it find places to lodge in him and did not show the lodging. When he finished, he looked up. "You ask me to sit with a truth that undoes songs," he said, "and to keep it from the singers. I ask you to use it right," Jon said. "Use it to forge the north into steel without breaking it. Use it to bend a queen across the sea to purposes that are hard to stomach but necessary. Use it to know what you hold when you hold me. Do not speak it to men who will turn it into a torch. I will be Stark in name. I will be Targaryen in claim as much as is needed to win winter. And then we will see if spring cares for names." Stannis weighed him as he had weighed the letter. "Melisandre told me I would see a shadow of dragons. I do not see it. I see a boy who thinks too far ahead and not far enough. But sometimes that is the right distance." He gestured at the ring. "What is this?" "It was with the letter," Jon said. "I believe it was my mother's, or a token of what men wished for her." "Keep it," Stannis said, as if he were granting a minor indulgence. "Wear it when you need to remember what costs you paid for all the rest. I will not wear it where eyes can make tales out of it." "Good. You learn." The king rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Winterfell is yours to keep warm and ordered while I attend to the rest. Do not mistake me, it is mine in law, but you will see to it that it belongs to the north in fact. We will put Manderly's men in the kitchens and Umber's men at the gates where they can grunt at their cousins and remember why they stopped hating one another. We will hang Bolton's banners and then burn them not out of zeal but out of hygiene. And you will not forget you took my name to do this." "I did not forget." "Good. One more thing. The child. Shireen?" Jon's heart lurched. "My daughter is mine," Stannis said sharply, "and not to be toyed with by priests. You spoke your price. You have it. She will not burn. The babe from the wildling's bed. My lady wife has strange kindness for him. He lives. Your claim of dragon will not be proved on a pyre." Jon's breath slid loose. "Thank you. Thank me when you bring me the rest." Stannis' eyes did not soften. "Dorne, the Riverlands, the Vale, they all listen to wolves. They will not hear me when I shout about justice and law. Write to them. Send ravens with your seal. When we can walk roads again, we will put you in a saddle and you will show them your face. If the world is to be held together with oaths and hunger and fear, I prefer a wolf to do the suturing. Wolves do not lie much. They merely bite when it serves them." A laugh escaped Jon before he could stop it. Felt like a thawed stream finding rocks again. "You make me sound a safer beast than I am." "No beast is safe," Stannis said. "We have winter for that." Melisandre came later, after men had worn themselves hoarse with victory sounds and after Jon had stood quiet in the yard and smelled Winterfell stones warming around fires for the first time in more than a year. She came like a streak of autumn through rime. She did not ask permission to enter the chamber where he was unwrapping old maps of the north and the wall and marking them with tiny coal stars. He had known she would come and had kept a candle burning for it. "You found your answer where you knew you would," she said. "I found a truth," he answered. "Not an answer." She stepped close enough to take in his face as if it were letters and she meant to decipher the script. "Your eyes are his. The shape of your jaw is hers. The fire told me half. The stone told you the rest. You fear the name that would make your brother's crown into a badge of folly. I fear using a name to remake a world that would hate the name for centuries and forget the reason by morning." He shook his head. "Names are a kind of fire. They burn more than men intend." "You think like a king," she said, and Jon felt himself flinch. "I think like a man who does not want to see children freeze while their fathers bicker. Then let us set our sights as high." Her smile did not reach her eyes, but it was very skilled. "You wear two shadows now, a wolf and a dragon. They will pull you different ways. The wolf will drag you to the heart tree and ask you to press your forehead to bark until sap and blood mingle. The dragon will drag you to a ship and make you cross to a city where bells have rung for queens who never earned them. Keep them both. Use the dragon to scare men in cities. Use the wolf to steady men in forests. You speak as if I am a knife you mean to wield." "You are a knife," Melisandre said simply. "Everyone is. The question is whether you lie and used in a drawer until rust takes you, or you are put to down meat and wood into manageable pieces. Better for the realm when knives are used by those who see further than hunger." He stared at her. "You will not burn children to light your way. I will not need to if men like you keep your bargains." The ruby at her throat pulsed once. "I have looked for the prince that was promised. Men think it is one man. Sometimes the fire shows me an army where the prince is a banner more than a body. Perhaps it is so. Perhaps we will make do with banners we can carry. You want a savior. I can offer a leader and a wall that stands a little longer," he said. "Take what you can carry." In the days that followed, Winterfell became a forge. Broken men were hammered into garrison. Kitchens were stocked. Manderly's grain poured in like gold dust. Messengers ran wrapped to the eyes. Jon walked halls and yards until he could have walked them blind as a boy. The godswood accepted him with a hush that was not disapproval. The heart tree's face watched him with an oldness that was not disdain. He put his hand to the bark and asked no questions because he had been answered enough. He stood there until cold bit his bones. When Ghost pressed close against his leg, Jon turned and went to his work. He wrote to the Vale, and his words found Sansa Stark, if not in the way he planned. They went to a girl no longer a girl whose name had been stolen and then returned like a purse found in snow. She never wrote back, but the letters made men in airy castles talk in careful tones and ask about wolves. He wrote to the Riverlands, where rivers were thin and men thinner. He wrote to Dorne, naming justice and the cost of it, and if the Prince of Sunspear did not answer, others listened who had daughters with daggers and patience that could outlast an old man's strategy. He wrote to Old Town and received back a small parcel that contained books whose pages were thin as onion skin and which stank of dust and secrets. He read about dragonglass, about odd fires that burned blue, about a horn that woke giants and another that broke walls. He sent Sam to Eastwatch with a letter sewn into the lining of his cloak that told him to go as far away as he needed to read what men had forgotten. Sam had wept and then smiled. Those were the faces he wore when leaving and returning both. Jon's authority expanded as if the cold itself poured it into molds and let it set. He did not hold court often because he had a king to do that, but when he did, men listened like boys who had learned to hear their father's boots on flagstones. He gave back to little lords what they could hold with dignity, and he gave big lords less than they wanted and more than they deserved. When disputes came, he ruled with the grain of northern wood. He did not flay. He did not sing. He did not make pyres except to warm kitchens and harden steel. News came north with ravens moving slow through cold so deep it chewed their wings. It said a queen across the sea had taught dragons to burn cities and then learned. Cities burn back. It said a Sel's word with a pale beard had betrayed and then been corrected. It said a girl in Bravos had forgotten her name so well that when she found it again, it was stronger than before. It said Euron Greyjoy had taught the sea to listen to him, and that the sea had eaten him slowly because it dislikes being taught. It said the Lannisters had teeth still, but their bite had grown infected. The best news came not by Raven but by Davos Seaworth's return, smelling of salt and exhausted righteousness. He came with a boy whose hair stood up like grass in wind and whose eyes were as wild as the island that had nearly swallowed him. Rickon Stark did not kneel when he entered the hall. He went straight to the table where Jon stood and stared up at his brother as if daring him to deny the face he wore. "Who cut your hair like that?" Jon asked softly, because his voice could not carry more. "An old woman with no teeth and a knife for fish," Rickon said. "She said I moved my head too much. She wanted me to look like a rock." "You look like a Stark. That's better than a rock," Jon said, and then he was on his knees and his arms were around the boy and they clung, and Ghost came and pressed his head against both of them until it hurt in a way that felt like flesh knitting to flesh. After they had wept and laughed and all the things that are the same in winter and summer when men meet the dead returned, Jon set his jaw and walked to the small solar. He closed the door. He put his hands flat on the wood. The choices he was about to make came in like a wind that you did not invite but could not keep out. Rickon Stark was Trübon. He was heir to Winterfell where rightful lines still had meaning. Jon was a bastard with a letter and a ring and a claim that he would not make a torch of. He had taken the name Stark in writ and in voice. The North had answered. But he had taken it with the condition of a man who understands that names belong to more than one bone. He went to Stannis. The king listened with his exactness. Jon explained what he would do. He would set Rickon above him in Winterfell. He would hold guardianship until the boy could hold it himself. He would remain Lord Commander of the Night's Watch because the wall was his, in bone and vow. He would continue as Stannis' voice to the North, but the North would look to Rickon and see the name worn by the right blood. Stannis considered this like a general examines a map, measuring angles and supplies. "It weakens me," he said. "This boy is a banner that draws men who remember old songs too loud." "It strengthens the North," Jon said. "If the North is strong, your line holds elsewhere more easily. Men do not revolt when they are asked to follow what they love. You sound like a priest of mother's milk. I sound like a man who knows winter." Jon put his hand flat on the table because it steadied him. "Your justice, you do not need a puppet Stark. You need a true one. I am useful because I can walk corridors and not be struck by the tapestries. I am useful because I can sit with the lords who would rather spit than sign and make them do both. The boy is useful because he silences the doubts you cannot argue down. Let me put him in his place here. Let me be what the Wall and the North need. When spring comes, if it ever comes, you can look at your maps again and find your crown." "Your claim," Stannis said, nodding slightly toward the letter in Jon's chest beneath his leathers. "You put that aside like a spare cloak." "I keep it in case the wind turns colder than we imagine," Jon answered. "I told you I would be Stark in name, Targaryen in claim. I told you the claim is a tool, not a song. Now is not the hour for it." "For a boy, you are old," Stannis said. He did not smile. "Very well. Put the boy in the chair. Keep your hands on the arms." They brought Rickon into the great hall when the banners had been rehung and the tables replanned and the smell of flayed skin had been driven out with smoke and time. Men crowded, their eyes greedy and careful. Scribes stood ready to record every oath. Rickon did not like the chair. He sat on it like he was daring it to bite him. He took the pledges as Jon had taught him to, head high, hands open, eyes direct. When men stumbled, he steadied them with a look that was more wolf than boy. When Wyman Manderley knelt, the hall went very quiet because a lot of meat goes down on its knees with a man shaped like that. He put a heavy hand to his proud belly and grinned, and Jon felt a knot in his stomach loosen. Later, after the hall was empty and the candles had become little bowls of tears, Rickon turned to Jon and asked, with no child in his voice, "Are you leaving me?" "Not leaving," Jon said. "Standing where I can see the enemy coming." Rickon nodded, with that same severe little motion his father had used when he accepted a hard truth and then put it down like a log on a fire. "You will come when I call. I will be there before you call. What if you can't? Then I will send wolves," Jon said. "I will send men who know how to howl." Rickon's grin showed a tooth gone a little crooked. "I like that." He liked other things that were not so simple. He liked to go down into the crypts and stare at the statues and try to remember faces his head had not been big enough to remember when he was small and everything had happened so quickly. He liked to run in the snow with Ghost bounding beside him like a quiet cloud. He liked arrows more than sums and soup more than stews. He did not like Melisandre. He looked at her as if she were a coal scuttle full of fire, and ash both and men were fools for not noticing all the soot. Winter bit harder. Nights grew like muscle. The others came nearer in men's dreams even when they did not in air. Jon rode the wall and spoke to men who had forgotten laughter and taught them how to remember it. He sent Tormund to treat with ragtag groups of FRE. E-folk who had learned too late what the Night King's smile looked like. He put them in new-made holdfasts and gave them land and asked them for sons when he called. He sent iron north and men south and sometimes the other way when sense required it. He kept Stannis supplied as best he could. He kept Rickon safe as best any man could with a wolf at his side. The message that changed the tenor of their winter came in on slow wings, wrapped in cloth of a kind Jon had not seen since he was a boy watching Ser Roderick open handsome packages. The seal was a three-headed dragon. The script was foreign and learned, the letters tall and precise. It came from a queen whose dragons were grown enough to cast shadows over men who swaggered in tall hats and swore they owned cities. The letter asked for counsel. It asked, bluntly, why Jon Snow had been named by men whose ravens had flown south at odd times with odd topics. And it asked if the North would recognize a queen who promised bread before rules. Jon read it in silence. He read it twice. He went to the courtyard and stared at the sky until the cold scoured his thoughts clean. He wrote an answer over 3 days, and every time he wrote a page he cut half of it away and kept the marrow. He told her what winter was. He told her what people needed when they had run out of shoes, not what they wanted when they had run out of stories. He told her what dragons could not do to hunger, and what they could do to men who thought winter had made them safe from fire forever. He told her about a ring he kept in a drawer and a letter he kept near his heart and promised neither and offered both in counsel. He did not tell her his claim. He did not need to. If her eyes were worth their place in her head, she would see the shape of it. He sent the letter south by 3 ravens with 3 different routes and 3 different hands to rest along the way, because the world had grown impolite with messages. He did not expect an answer soon. He had winter to fight. The answer came 6 weeks later, heralded by a man with hair like spun silver and a smile that had learned how to disappear. He wore no sigil but had 3 little scars on his wrist that would not interest most men. He called himself a steward of words. Jon received him under the high beams of Winterfell and fed him soup. The man said very little, but the letter he bore said much. It spoke of a woman who did not care for the titles men had used to crush one another, but cared for the weight that grain put in a skirt or the warmth that will put into a baby's bones. It asked Jon to meet her halfway in a place where winds could reach. It promised nothing but a look across distance and a measure of truth. Stannis read it and grunted. "She is either wiser than rumor or more dangerous," he said. "Perhaps both." "She is both," Melisandre murmured from her corner. "She is a girl who has become a mother 3 times over, and all 3 grew hungry differently." "Winter does not let us choose our dinner companions," Stannis said. "Meet her if you must. Not at White Harbor. Not at the Twins. The Neck, perhaps. If Howland Reed still breathes swamp air, we will make him earn it." "Greenseers do not come at a king's whistle," Melisandre replied dryly. "They come when the world they prefer threatens to vanish," Stannis said. He looked to Jon. "Go and be my wolf and her dragon both. Bite nothing you do not have to bite." They chose a small island in the Neck where reeds huddled and frogs made a noise like old men snoring. The day smelt of green rot and something like spring that had gotten lost. Jon brought Ghost and 10 good men. The queen brought 2 men with swords that did not need names. a narrow-eyed woman in a gown the color of boiled plums, and a boy with a grin like a kicked gate who wore a cloak the color of the sunset. Above them the air shivered once. A shadow moved and then was gone, a pale wing cutting the clouds. She was not as tall as Jon had expected. She had a way of moving that made his mind think of cats and paths that do not go straight because they do not have to. Her hair was moon-pale. Her eyes were a color Jon could not set words to. They changed with the light. She looked at Ghost first and smiled without teeth, and Ghost, who did not like most people, afforded her the courtesy of lifting his head a little higher and not growling. They spoke standing among reeds and short gray trees that could not decide whether to be wood or grass. There were no thrones. There was no kneeling. There was a column of midges that kept trying their luck and a wind stubborn as a mule. Jon told her the truth of winter, again, because it was the only thing he had learned that never wore out with telling. She told him the truth of cities and coin and men who called themselves free because they had made themselves prisons without walls. They circled the word claim like a pit that had been covered with twigs. They did not step on it. She said she asked him because she heard a voice in his letters that did not hum for power. He said he answered her because her letters used hunger as a measure of time, not pride. "How do you call yourself?" she asked at last. "Jon," he said. "When I go to the God's Wood I am Stark in name. When I ride the wall I am Snow, and that is a good name. When I speak to you now, I suppose I am both and more. And when you look into a brazier," she said softly, too softly for anyone but him to hear, "I see a boy who chose to build," he said. She smiled then, and he saw what the world wanted of her and what she could give if men did not ruin it. "We will not tear the land in two with our names," she said. "We will meet it with our work. I will not claim a crown I cannot feed. I will not bring dragons north if I cannot keep them from eating what little lives. I will put seed in earth, and if men in red or gold or stag skins do not like it, they can plant something better and prove it thrive. This." He breathed out as if a hand that had been on his throat had loosened. "Good then. When the dead come they will not ask for our sigils. They will ask only for where our weak spots lie. We will not give them many. They made no pacts that day that could be sung. They made agreements so quiet that only men who like quiet would notice." Jon went back to Winterfell. The queen went back to her ships and her cities and her dragons that had learned to hunt in sky and not on men's fears. Letters went between Winterfell and wherever her fleet was anchored that month. Some did not arrive. Enough did. They built a road of words that even storms could not entirely tear up. When the Night King came, it was not as Jon had pictured him. The tales had made a monster who strutted in ice like silk and took women's skins for tents. What came was emptiness shaped into malice by hunger so old it had grown its own cunning. The cold that blew ahead of them made the breath hang and drop like stones. The first that breached the forests by the Shadow Tower were thin as sadness and quick as memory. They wore the rags of lives. Their eyes were the color of the far sky when it snows forever. Jon stood on the wall and saw them move, and the fear that came up in him was clean. It did not lie to him. It told him he was small and winter was large. It told him he had made a good garden but that frost can reach. He named his captains and gave them the levers. He sent signals along the wall that sent flame into secret wells and hot oil down channels men had carved when kings stopped sending bread to their brothers. When the first wave broke, the sound was like glass hurting. L'oncle Aussan. It sang when it met a White Walker's blade that was not steel and not stone and not anything men had a right to set words to. Ghost leaped and pulled down a thing that had once been a hunter and whose bones hated the ground for remembering warmth. Men died. That is truth's ugliest line. Men died and some rose again with wrong eyes until the arrow with obsidian tip kissed their throats. Women fought on the stairs with spits and knives because even at the wall men still have kitchens. Children carried stones. The earth shook once. Melisandre's fires burned steadily as if they had been waiting for proper prey. The wall held that day. It did not crack. Enough of the ships returned with frightened souls that the army the dead would have had was a little less thick. The queen sent north casks of oil, and with them came a man with a hand like stone who knew something about fire that did not need wood and did not care for oxygen. With him came a woman with hair like a night forest who had once hunted in a different way. They brought an idea of trenches that could burn even when the snow fell directly into them. They brought a method of sewing dragonglass into leather so it wore like armor and wouldn't shatter when struck. Stannis came in person to stand on a tower while the 10th assault beat against them. He did not give men speeches. He gave orders that made sense. He bled in a way that was not theatrical. He listened to Jon when Jon told him a gate must be forced to fail so another could be made strong. He sent Davos to a place where fire could be lit beneath the ice and poured into cracks at the right moment like wine into a cup. He said at dawn, looking down at the world gone brittle with brightness, "This boy is why I like law. Law makes men stand where they are supposed to stand. If they do, sometimes they hold." "They held," Jon said. "For now," Stannis said. "Summer holds for now every year. It is not a victory, but we praise it anyway." There came a night when dragons shadowed the wall. They came at dusk like pieces of cloud gone wrong, and men fell to their knees because men have long memories for things that should not fly. The queen did not ride close. She was not such a fool. Her beasts poured fire on the treeline where the army of the dead had massed as if to show the wall that even old stones might be a comfort rather than a crutch. The flames burned strange, turned blue in spots and green at the edges, where men had buried pitch and dragonglass. The night went loud and ugly and then quiet and uglier still. In the quiet men slept without being told. Jon stood watch and kept his eyes open because those who cannot sleep should earn it. When morning came, the snow fell soft as ash. The dead had retreated. The forest smoked in thin little lines like stitches. The dragons turned and were gone. And for the first time Jon felt no worry when he watched a shadow go. He felt the shape of a world that had been forced to cooperate. He wrote the queen a letter that did not praise her dragons. Thanked her for the timing instead. It told her that fire used carefully is more lovable than fire used loudly. She returned a letter that teased him once, lightly, about his lack of poetry and then thanked him for telling her where not to set flame. She had learned men liked her more when she asked where their kitchens were before she burned their barns. The war became life. It did not end in a glorious clash. It ended in 1,000 small holdouts where the dead finally had fewer numbers than the living. It ended on a night where the aurora made green blades in the sky and men stared up and half believed in gods again. It ended when a woman in rags picked up a dragonglass knife and put it into a thing's chest because she had grown tired of screaming, and that tiredness made her precise. It ended because Jon's letters and Stannis' stubbornness and Manderly's ships and Davos' good sense and Melisandre's flames and Sam's reading and the Queen's dragons and Tormund's laughter all kept the line together long enough to make a chord. The dead fell away like smoke after a feast. The cold softened imperceptibly, like a hand that had flexed its fingers and decided to rest. Men counted fewer losses in the night. Children started to play. Again, they were cautious at first, as if they thought the snow might take offense at your laughter. It did not. Jon went south to Winterfell and stood under the heart tree and put his forehead to the bark finally. He told the old with the names of the dead he had kept alive in letters and the dead he had killed with orders. He asked no forgiveness. He did not expect any. He thanked the tree for listening. He went to the crypt and put the ring back in its niche beside the letter. He had worn it twice. Once in a private meeting with a queen who knew what he was without proof. Once when a king had been given an argument that needed a weight heavier than words. He had not needed it more often. Rickon came to him with a face that had thinned and a body that had grown like a weed in a broken wall. Stubborn, hungry, and beautiful. He spoke with the quick, relentless cadence of a boy who has decided to be a lord. "I want to send men to rebuild the mills along the White Knife. We are not a strong place if we cannot grind. And I want to replant the orchards near Barrowton. It will make the girls merry for cider." Jon laughed, and the laugh sounded strange and easy. "Do it. You won't come with me?" "I will walk the wall again," Jon said. "I will go to Eastwatch and see if the piers still hold. I will send letters if I find any rot. I will come when you call." Rickon nodded. He did not cling. He walked as a wolf walks when it knows its pack is close, whether or not it can see the other white shapes. Melisandre came to Jon one last time before he left. She looked thinner. The ruby at her throat glowed less proudly. She laughed at his glance. "Do not worry for my fires," she said. "They fed themselves well this winter. They can burn on your memory for a while." "What do you want of me?" he asked, because their conversations were easier when he asked what bargain she would name. "To tell you I was wrong about one thing," she said, eyes steady and unreadable. "I thought the prince was a single man. He is sometimes. Here he was many. You were one of them. You wore two shadows and didn't let either turn you into a torch. I will remember that when I light braziers and need to aim the heat. You taught me to keep my wolf close," he said. "That was wisdom. I tried to hate your fires and failed. Instead, I learned to aim them with you." She inclined her head graciously. "And did you ever wear a dragon under your skin?" "I wore a name like a ring in a pocket," Jon said. He touched his breast where the letter's outline used to press when he rode too far hard. "I find I prefer to go to my godswood without it." "You would be a dull king," she said, amused. "I would be a good wall," he said. She smiled with her eyes at last. "We cannot all be kings. The world would get nothing done." At Eastwatch, Jon met Sam again and found him thinner and more certain, with a pouch of notes that could have propped a door open or closed a throat. Gilly's child was running and laughing with other children. It is a sound men embroider their dreams with, and they had it on the docks with the snap of sails and the slap of lines. Sam walked Jon along the piers as if they were groves of fruit trees and showed him where the pilings needed new iron and where the wood's grain had taken the weather well enough to make another season. "I found pages about the wall older than anything else we have," Sam said. "Men carved tunnels like ant colonies in its foot. We can put fires there again if we dare. It would keep the ice honest." "Do it," Jon said. "Ask for volunteers. Tell them they'll get the first casks of cider when Rickon's orchards are drunk." Sam grinned. "You're learning lordly bribery." "I learned from a man who had pies for knives," Jon said. In time, spring came in a way that made men marvel because they had forgotten the exact shade of ice melt and the particular sound a brook makes when it takes itself seriously again. The first green came like a rumor. It was worth more than rumors. It was grass. It was small and arrogant, and men loved it with the fervor of fanatics. Jon went to Winterfell when the first shoots appeared between stones on the south wall. He walked under beams that 1,000 hands had touched for work and love. In the yard, boys wrestled. The sound of swords on posts made a good steady music. He sought Rickon and found him in the hall at a long table with a woman showing him how to hold a quill so he could write his name on a page that would not stain with hesitation. Rickon looked up. "Will you go again?" "Yes," Jon said. "The wall doesn't sleep. Neither do you." "Sometimes," Jon said with something like joy, "sometimes I will sleep in the crypt, with ghosts who bear me no malice." Rickon tilted his head. "And your claim?" "Mine when I need it," Jon said. "Not when I don't." Rickon considered that, then nodded. "You are a wall. Then lean on me only when you must," Jon said. "Walls fall when boys climb them for no reason." Rickon grinned sideways. "I like climbing." "I know." Jon knelt and put his forehead to Rickon's. The old gesture that says everything words mangle. Ghosts stood over them like a mountain that had chosen to be gentle. When he rose, his eye caught the high window and the light standing thick in it, like fresh milk set in sunlight. He thought of a letter sealed in a niche, and of a ring sleeping beside it. He thought of a queen somewhere plotting how to plant wheat in a city that had forgotten how to be soil. He thought of Stannis in a chamber with maps and the particular smell of parchment and coin and old leather, stubborn as law, stubborn as winter. He thought of Melisandre, who had found a way to like the cold because it told her where her fires would be seen best. He thought of Manderly's men with flour dusting their hair and chests like new snow, of Tormund's booming joke making a baby laugh on White Harbor's dock, of Davos's hands steady on a tiller and D on a pen. He thought of the wall, which is a thought that can run a man's life through its paces forever. It is a good thought if you give it work. He left Winterfell quietly, because quiet departures are easier to bear. He rode with Ghost at his stirrup and 3 men at his back. The road north had thawed into mud that clung to hooves with a satisfying vulgarity. The air smelled faintly of rot in a way that promises growing. When he reached the weeping water, he stopped and let the horse drink and washed his face in the chill, as if to take back some of the boy he had left there years before. He felt older, and he felt the same. He felt his vows like a ring he had chosen to wear invisible. He turned it without touching it. On the rise before the wall viewed him with that silent old regard. He paused. The great blue-white face stood there as it had always stood, forgiving in its bluntness, lacking in pretense. He tasted salt. He tasted iron. He pressed his heels lightly to his horse and went forward. Atop the wall the wind had its teeth again, but they did not trouble him. The world on one side grew green where it could. The world on the other side stayed white longer and then, grudgingly, allowed a moss to colonize a fallen log. He stood between them and did not belong to either and did not need to belong. Ghost leaned against his leg. Below, a horn sounded once. A low sound like a long breath, calling men to a meal that would make them sleep. Jon Snow, Jon Stark in name, Targaryen in claim, stood his watch and understood he would never be done. He smiled at the horizon as if it had offered him a bargain and he had shaken on it. He drew the cold in and breathed it out. He let the old stones tell him their version of forever. He did not argue. He simply stood, and where he stood the realm held.